The real one. You're
the real
here.
one, not the fake one.
Yeah.
Those fakers out there.
Not for the fakers. To find out why God is awesome. So glad that you're joining the show. Cory, you've been holding out to come on this show for a while, but you're here.
I am. I'm pretty sure when Aaron sees this episode, he's going to be very upset.
Yes.
Because he's asked me 1,000 times.
All right. Well, it's not the nose you make, but the one yes that really determines everything. So here we go. We're going to talk about how God has been awesome in your life. So thankful for you taking time for this interview. Tell me a little bit, just to start, tell me some ways that God started working in your life. Tell me a little bit about what that looked like. Then what we're going to talk about is a little bit about how God shaped you between then and when you actually became a missionary for a while, and then into ministry now, and then something crazy happening tomorrow. You're going to have to stay tuned for the whole thing to hear, for those of you that are watching, about the amazing thing coming up tomorrow. But start off for me, Cory. Tell me, don't touch your tape. Don't touch your face. It's Corona time. All right? No. Oh, boy. I am socially distancing from that.
I'm glad we were socially distancing.
Yeah, this is over camera. So tell me about how God really started working in your life and how that all started.
All right, so I feel like it's important for me to mention that my grandma would take me to church every Sunday when I was a kid.
Cool.
In fact, one of my first memories of church, I was in Sunday school, and I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and I was in this Easter play, and I had one line. I wasn't a Christian, wasn't born or raised in the church, had only been gone for about a year. But I remember I had this one line. I was a pretty pivotal character in the Easter story. They let me play Jesus.
Wow.
Which is probably has a lot to do with like all the pride and egotistical issues that I had later on in life. But my one line was, "I am Jesus." And I don't know if that's all I could remember or what, but that was the one line they gave me. So I would go to church.
That's perfect. Most people think that they are. So that's an appropriate
I feel like that
line.
actually shaped the next 11 years of my life. Because my grandma would die when I was 8 years old. And for the most part, never really ended up in church again until I was about 19 or 20. I don't remember exactly. I know a lot of people have like this like story of like they can pinpoint the moment that they like got saved. For me, I don't have that. I eventually started coming to church actually because of a girl that I thought was cute. And she asked me to come to church because she was drunk. And I must have been even more drunk because I said yes. And so I came to Sunlight actually and heard the gospel and met a few people that seemed like they were really cool. Pastor Scott, I remember it was like after the sermon he made a beeline for me and just introduced himself because he could see that I was new, and I actually really enjoyed it. Did I get saved that morning? No, but I enjoyed it, and so I see now that was the beginning of like a process.
Okay.
Over the next few months, I would go to church and I would hear the gospel, and things would even start to kind of click and make sense.
Real quick. Sure. I love that you're saying that. I totally want to go down this path. Tell me, you keep using the word being saved. What does that actually mean? And there's going to be some people watching. I just touched my face. There's going to be some people watching that are not sure what that term means and how to know if you are. So tell us a little bit about that real quick.
Sure. So being saved, it's this one-time thing that happens when you recognize your need for a savior. You realize that you can't live this life on your own. It all comes to this word gospel that you hear us use a lot at Sunlight. Awesome. Gospel literally means good news. But it starts off with a little bit of bad news. And the bad news is that we're sinners, that God has this perfect standard that we don't rise up to. In fact, I don't even rise up to the standard that I have set for myself, let alone the standard God has set for me.
Right.
And I can't do life on my own. And I need someone to help me. I need someone to do this for me. And luckily for us, Jesus did. And over time, I came to see that I really needed him. And maybe from, I'm going to use one of your funny lines that I've always loved.
Oh, man.
You know, from when I was young, I guess I knew Jesus, but we weren't on speaking terms for a long time. And at some point when I was about 19, I realized that I needed him, and gave my life over to Christ, or rather, he probably kind of broke down the door and just kind of walked in.
Hashtag ritual.
Yeah.
Great.
And so, yeah, that's what it means to be saved, is that you can't do life on your own. You realize you can't do life on your own, and you need someone to help you, and that someone is Jesus.
And so God comes in and changes your heart of stone into a heart of flesh, it says in Ezekiel, right? And, and there's this new life lived with and for it. That's awesome. So, okay, I interrupted you, though, which I have a tendency to do. So you just had this miraculous change and this miracle that happens inside you. How do you react? Where do you go from there if you don't have maybe a background in church?
Well, luckily, I went right to Pastor Scott.
Nice.
I went right to one of the best ones you can go to. He actually remembers this better than I do because I don't know if I just had like a flurry of emotions going that day or something. I probably did. But there was a point where I came to that realization that I needed a Savior and that I wanted to give my life to Christ. And so I went forward to him for prayer, and he prayed for me. And then afterwards, I kind of said, so now what? And we began meeting up for discipleship, like a one-on-one Bible study the very next Friday.
Awesome.
And I would suggest for anyone who is watching, if you are new to Christianity, or maybe you're not even a Christian and you want to learn more about what that is, or maybe you've been a Christian for 20 years, but you still haven't quite taken that step to just go a little bit deeper, I really recommend you meeting with somebody who'd be willing to take that walk with you. Meeting with Pastor Scott, being discipled by him, that probably really changed my life.
Now, let me ask you a question. You're talking about discipleship. You talked about this life-on-life relationship that really changed your life. Does Pastor Scott have to be the one that does the discipling? Like, does he have the magic sauce that makes somebody into like a follower of Jesus? And is that it?
So I'm going to say no. It doesn't have to be Pastor Scott. I will say I do kind of think he has the magic sauce.
Wow.
He's made that ready for the rest of us, though.
Yeah. Okay.
He's passed it along.
So that's great. So if you're in a relationship, in some kind of discipling relationship with somebody that, you know, you're reading the Bible with, you're talking about theology, you're learning, it's awesome in this way that, you know, you feel part of that chain. You disciple people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like you have to have some kind of huge theologic degree or some kind of like background in like it's having a life-on-life relationship with someone and reading the Bible with them and studying, right?
I would say this. Is it just simply the responsibility of the pastors or the people on stage to pour into other people? Absolutely not. You know, that's all of our responsibility.
We're in ministry.
We're blessed to have I keep saying lucky, and I guess that's not quite right because #reformed.
Yeah.
We're blessed enough to have some really good leadership here at Sunlight through Pastor Scott and all the people that he's poured into. You and I both being two of those people who now you use the word network. We have a whole network of people who are discipling and pouring into other people and helping them grow. Being discipled just means to grow more like Christ, and so you and I literally have a hand in helping people be more like Christ, teaching them how to walk more like Christ. Now, does that mean that you and I get it right every single time? Absolutely not. All right. I play Call of Duty with like 14-year-old kids. All right.
I mean, that is a cool ministry. We got to talk about that later.
It's the funnest ministry, but some of these kids, they kill me every time I respawn. Yeah, I don't get it right every time. I'm not exactly like Christ every time.
That's great.
But you know, no one is except for Christ. We do our best to walk like him, and there's a lot of grace in the plethora of ways that we mess up.
You just used one of my favorite words, plethora. This is my friends. I mean, plethora one for those of you, and now two since I repeated it twice.
And so, if you feel like you have to get it right with God or start living a better life before you can be saved or be discipled or anything like that, you're reading into Christianity wrong. Christianity is not about us getting it right and then coming to God. It's about us realizing we couldn't get it right and God coming to us.
Oh man! Oh, what a quote! Write that down. Someone write that down. That's good. That's awesome. Yeah, this idea of grace is so crazy. So okay, so we're in your story now. Speaking of grace, you just realized, man, that you need a savior. You've just been there might not be an exact point at which God just like came in and did that. You can't like pinpoint it, but he did. So that's progress somewhere in there. We're not exactly sure. And then God's working in your life through discipleship. What happened after that? What was there? Was it all just ponies and rainbows from then on out, or was there some struggle? What happened?
There were definitely some struggles. I would say the first struggle that I faced is that, I started having friends not really want to be my friends anymore, because they'd probably a lot of the time seen me at my worst. Like I said, I was drunk at a party when I got invited to church in the first place. They'd seen me do some things that, for me to now be a Christian, they would be pretty skeptical of.
Sure.
And I have no room to argue that. I would be skeptical too. So it hurt to have like friends not really want to be my friends anymore. There were like different, living in a world where sin is like almost celebrated, and then trying to live otherwise. There's definitely a struggle. And when you're a new Christian, I'll just say I was very blessed to have people like Pastor Scott and people like you and Aaron walking with me in that. I don't know if you guys realize how encouraging you were during that point. But being a new Christian, you really need like just a support group. Because especially, I worked, at that point I worked at like Dunkin' Donuts.
They have the best sweet.
Not like, their sweet tea might be good, coffee, meh. But I'll tell you this, definitely not Christian run, And the particular Dunkin' Donuts that I worked at was also in a very sketchy part of town, so I would get sketchy customers, and there just wasn't a whole lot of good influence directly around me outside of the walls of sunlight. Now,
tough.
obviously, as time went by, the friends that I would start to accumulate, and I guess for lack of better terms, replace, were people who loved God and were encouraging me to grow and encouraging me to be more like Christ in that way, or that we were growing together or whatever it may be. Serving in ministry was one of the biggest things, because now I'm like, when you're serving on ministry, you're like on the front lines, like you're right next to people, shoulder to shoulder with people who are trying to grow in Christ. And the first place that I got plugged into ministry was youth group, with you and Aaron and Carissa.
Yeah.
And that was our youth leadership team.
yeah, that was it. Real quick, I can't move past this. I got to ask a question. There's this debate among Christians, and you kind of like tiptoed into it, but you didn't like reveal your side. And so, what's the balance? We're throwing it all at you here. Solve the problem. No, what's the balance between in the Christian walk of having Christian friends while also not alienating. You were talking about the fact that you felt alienated because there was this new lifestyle that you had that they didn't necessarily want to be a part of. But as somebody that changes, that God changes their heart, talk a little bit about what that looks like. How do you have friends? Because we're still called to preach the gospel to people. How does that balance work out in your life?
It took practice. It took a lot of work because it did not come immediately to me. In fact, after I left Dunkin' Donuts, I ended up at another job where my district manager was a Christian, but everyone around me was also not a Christian. And it was like extremes. You had one person who was like extremely angry and would kind of like curse out customers, and it was like no, it was normal. Like it wasn't like she wouldn't get in trouble for it. And you had another person who it was just like all he would talk about was like sex and just sort of objectifying people. And it was like I went from that job to a job where like everyone around me was the extremes.
Yeah.
And then there I was just kind of driving in my delivery truck, listening to sermons or trying to listen to mostly Christian music and, still early on in my faith. It didn't come immediately to me because they definitely saw me mess up too.
Yeah.
There were days where I'd like walk in and maybe I'd just heard a really good sermon, or maybe I'd, read my Bible that morning, and for whatever reason, I was like a little bit more fired up than usual.
Yeah.
And then it was like they knew it and would just try to break me down. And I laugh now because I see how much I grew during that season. But while I was there, it was tough. I would say this that um, I recommend having Christian friends. I recommend having people who, again, like I said, encourage you to grow, will grow with you, will be there for you to lean on. Those are important principles for you to have, and nobody's going to do that better than somebody who knows the person that you ultimately lean on, which is Jesus. I recommend having Christian friends. However, how can you share the gospel? How can you really be present in the world with people if you don't also have non-Christian friends? You have to. Is there a balance? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the secret formula or exactly how that's supposed to be. But I know that, in fact, now being in ministry, the reason that I still have a job that's secular is so that I can be a part of culture and be interacting with people. It's really important for me to feel like, even in little ways. So at work right now, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm a barista at Starbucks.
Barista.
And barista life.
Another shirt. For those of you that posted, we should make that a shirt. Barista life.
Barista life. I'm a barista at Starbucks, and this could be archived, and people could watch this 20 years from now. So if you're watching this in the future, we're dealing with a pandemic right now with the coronavirus.
And Starbucks is taking over the world in this distant future anyway. So
yeah. And people are they're nervous right now. And it'd be really easy for me to, I don't know, share the newest coronavirus memes and just kind of help people buy into the hysteria, into the panic. Or I can be there to, I don't know, offer somebody some good news or some hope. And that's the route that I've chosen to go. And even just yesterday, I had a really great conversation with one of my baristas as we were opening yesterday morning about she's starting to get nervous and trying to decide if she needs to not work for the next month and stay at home and just quarantine. And I told her, either way, God's got this. Do what you think is best right now, but what you shouldn't do is panic. Because God's got this.
Yeah.
And she texted me later and just said, I've been leaning on that all day, and that really helped.
That's awesome.
And right, like on the outside, I'm like, awesome. On the inside, like fireworks, right? Because that's the first time that I've talked to her about God. And I don't know if she's a believer or where she's at. I don't believe she is. But that was like a cool thing, right?
Sure.
There's a balance. We have to be present in the world, but it's a way of being able to influence the world without the world influencing too much of you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
be aware of the world, but not let it dictate,
yeah,
everything about who you are.
yeah. And so there's something really important about being grounded in your faith and grounded in Scripture if you're going to do that. And I recommend you doing that. So that means I recommend you being grounded in your faith and in Scripture.
Awesome. Let's talk. We were on this journey. We took this huge rabbit trail because that is my middle name. It's given, actually. They just expected that. Jason Rabbit Trail Palm. So here's where we're at in your story. You have now developed these friendships, and it's not all roses and ponies and rainbows, because it's hard dealing with these friendships. What happened next? I know that you went abroad.
Yeah. So let me start just a little bit back.
Sure.
Told you, got involved in ministry, youth ministry specifically. Kind of got tricked into it by our former youth director.
Yep.
She said I should come hang out one night. I didn't know that there was going to be a bunch of like 12-year-olds there, but it was fun and actually fell in love with youth ministry.
That's
and,
cool.
After a few months, went on my first mission trip to West Virginia. You were there.
Yep.
You and I worked very hard on these stairs that we just couldn't let go of.
Yeah.
And actually, you, me, and another youth kid, like remodeled the whole bathroom that week. It was super cool, and I don't know, just I think that was where the first time maybe I made my faith my own a little bit.
Cool.
Flash forward a year later, and we went on another mission trip, and this time you were not there, I don't believe. Were you? Did you go to Georgia?
Yeah, I was in Georgia.
All right, you were in Georgia.
I was less memorable because I was just constantly doing things, I guess. I don't know. It's like mission trips don't do anything but that.
So we went to Georgia, and like you said, it was still a great trip. There was something about it that was less memorable, but it was fun. We had a good time. Anyway, a few months later, I get this text from the guy who ran that missions agency, and he said, "Hey, do you want to come be a full-time missionary?" And I texted him back and said, "Nope." and, and in my mind, I'm like, the beds aren't comfortable. There's not enough food. The showers are like always cold. No, I don't want to go be a full-time missionary. That sounds terrible. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, and so I asked a few people. I know I asked Pastor Scott and Pastor Bill and Aaron and you and all sorts of people. And what I was really waiting on, I was waiting on one person to tell me, "No, you shouldn't do that." And
we all let you
a lot. None of you would do that. Everybody said, "Yeah, you should go." Even non-Christians that I knew were like, "Yeah, you should go." And so I'm like, "Fine." And so I text the guy back, and I say, literally the text I sent said, "Fine, you win, I'm in."
Nice.
And he texted me back and said, "Awesome, here's how much money you need to raise every month to make this happen." And I saw that dollar amount, and I was like, "I'm out." No way. I don't even know enough people. All right. I'm 20 something years old. All of my friends are also 20 something years old, which means they don't have money to help me with this. I'm out. And so, of course, it wouldn't leave my mind. And so I told a few people, and I had one person who said, "Yeah, I'll cover your first 2 months."
Wow.
And then I had other friends. At the time, I was helping out at a Christian hip hop studio, and had,
of course, one does.
And the guys at the studio said we should throw a concert, and so we threw a concert, and that concert alone ended up raising. And let me just say before I say the dollar amount, at this concert, there was also people selling food. We had like the youth group put together a bake sale for the concert. beverages, and then there was actually a lady cutting hair at this concert. Anything that you guys could get me away, you were doing. And that concert ended up raising by itself another 3 months worth of.
Wow.
And so all of a sudden, I'm covered for 5 months. I only needed 8 months because the summer was free. And all of a sudden, there's no reason for me to not go. You know, at this point, I was convinced God was going to take care of the last couple of months, which He did. People began telling me that they would send me $10 a month or $20 a month or whatever, and the money added up, and eventually we had the entire year saved up and like had it all ready to go. Even before I left for the mission trip, I was able to fund for almost the entire year, and so there's no reason for me not to go at that point. So I went on a mission trip, and I got to lead short-term mission trips for a year.
Cool.
Places like West Virginia and Georgia and Brooklyn, New York, and even Puerto Rico. And it was an amazing time.
Awesome. God is awesome. Look at that before. It was like something you were supposed to do, right?
Yeah. It's almost like these things were planned out for me.
Yeah, exactly. That's so cool. Yeah. And then now I'm just for the sake of time, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. And so you went through this time, and now I touched my face again. And now you are working in youth ministry. Did that just fall in your lap, or was that something you really wanted for a long time? Or I know the answer, but I'm asking for everyone.
I know you know the answer. You're kind of my boss. Yeah, so man, somewhere we talked about that mission trip to Georgia. Just a few months before that, we went on a retreat, and sometime throughout that retreat, there came this moment where I just realized that youth ministry is what I wanted to do, and that I wanted to pursue that vocationally. That was like 2012.
Man.
And so around that time, actually, there was an opening for youth ministry at our church, which Aaron ended up getting, which was awesome. He was for sure, without a doubt, the person for the job. And
the guy's awesome. Not just because he's in the Facebook thread right now.
Yeah.
He's a great
guy. He ran the youth group, and he ran it well for like 8 years, like 7-8 years. Did an amazing job. But there was this moment where I knew that I wanted not necessarily his job at Sunlight, but I wanted that job. He was doing what I wanted. And so I began to reach out to other churches. I applied for a church in Miami and a church in Port St. Lucie, but a different denomination. That's how bad I wanted it.
Yeah.
And a few other churches that I reached out to in different, even different states. And one by one, man, closed door after closed door. And then there came this point where I stopped pursuing it. I was still volunteering in youth ministry and still growing and still loved it, but I stopped pursuing it. And then out of nowhere, I get this text from Aaron one day. Hey, do you have plans for lunch? And I know that when he says, do you have plans for lunch? It's because he wants to talk about something.
Yeah.
Guy. Yeah. I didn't know what he wanted to talk about. We met up, and more or less he offered me his job.
Wow.
Outside on the Chick-fil-A patio.
So the food was good too.
Well, yeah. I mean, the chicken was definitely blessed. And I remember that was February 1st.
Cool.
I remember that because it was a Monday. February 2nd, I was put in charge of middle school. Not on payroll yet, but in charge of middle school.
Yeah, all the responsibility, none of the pay.
Right? Yeah. and started doing middle school ministry.
Cool.
And after a month or two, maybe a little bit longer than that, I don't remember exactly, I was eventually given high school ministry too. And so began running both. It was awesome. I loved it. It was and even still, I'm saying even still, it's exciting. It's, I think youth ministry is interesting because you definitely have the most fun. But you definitely end up with, yeah, right? But you also end up with, like, there's some hard stuff that these kids go through that I never had to face.
Wow.
I don't know if I have time for, like, a quick story or anything, but
you do. Everybody's working from home.
Yeah, fair. In the year that I've taken over youth ministry, I had one kid. Her dad kidnapped her sister, and like that was a whole thing, and it was hidden from her for the first little bit, and so the youth leaders knew about it, but we weren't allowed to say it to her until she found out about it through the news and through somebody else telling her. And
wow,
her dad ended up in jail for a little bit, and that was a really hard thing.
Sure.
I don't know how to navigate that, you know. Even more recently, we've had kids who are cutting, and kids who are dealing with suicidal thoughts and all sorts of stuff like that. Kids who aren't sure what gender they are or what gender they want to be, or you know, there's all sorts of crazy stuff. And when I was 15, granted that was half a lifetime ago for me, I didn't have that. That wasn't real life to me. And so these kids today are facing things that I don't want to say are new, because several of these things have been there, of course. But we talked about sin being celebrated earlier. That's very much the case here too. That if you were biologically one gender, but in your mind you're another. 15 years ago, there was like a level of shame that was involved in that. Now there's a level of celebration. And so our kids who are, growing up sort of in that 1 foot in the faith world and 1 foot in the secular world, trying to navigate what's wrong, what's right, where do I fit in, where does this belong, and who's going to accept the most.
Yeah. Am I accepted? Am I loved?
Yeah. Because everybody just wants to be accepted. I mean, nobody wants to feel like they're an outcast. The reason that I think people are not staying home when they're supposed to is that nobody wants to be alone, and nobody wants to feel like FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Nobody wants to feel like they're not included or involved or cared about or loved. And I think that maybe that's why quarantine has been so hard, especially for the 20-something-year-olds and younger. Right? The rest of us who are old, we're tired. We're like, yeah, give me a week home. But I think the biggest thing is acceptance. They don't know where they're accepted. And we as a church, and I guess especially my job as the youth director, is to make sure that the youth group that I'm running and the culture that we've built as a youth culture is somewhere that anybody can feel like they belong and feel like they're included and a part of and loved.
Awesome.
Because I think that heaven's not going to be a place where everybody looks the same and acts the same and dresses the same.
Dang.
And if it is, I'm probably not going to be there. Because I'm not sure that any of us, there's no cookie cutter model for Christianity.
Yeah. The cookie cutter model, if there was one, and this is a quote, man, I wish I remember who said it. You'll probably know because you're smarter than me. That the only thing we bring to our salvation is the sin that makes it necessary. And so
I just quoted that recently. Who the heck was that?
If you know, put it in the comments, because that will help us out. So if you're listening right now, Google it. I can't. Otherwise, you're just going to see me Google, and it's going to be embarrassing.
I'm thinking it was R.C. Sproul.
Yeah, that doesn't. I don't know. Write in the comments, and I promise you, I'll find out. And if nobody's written it, I will quote that later today. But now you're talking about being loved and accepted. What people have been waiting. We're 34 minutes and 33 seconds. You're loved and accepted. Something is happening with your love and acceptance. Tomorrow, is that right?
Yeah. So to quote the theologian Beyonce.
Oh, good.
I liked it, so I put a ring on it.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
I got engaged back in November. It was November 3rd.
On a mountain.
On a mountain. Feel like I outdid myself on that one. I still feel good about that. You know, a little pat on the back.
There you go.
To my sister, if you're watching this, thank you, because she's the person that picked out the spot. She knew this was happening. And we are getting married tomorrow. It is not an April Fool's joke. We are actually getting married on April 1st. This wedding has been really interesting because it seems like in the last 3 weeks, as the world has been turned upside down, nothing has quite worked out the way that we planned. At one point, we had something like 215 people invited to our wedding. And then out of nowhere, we were told, nope, you're only allowed 50. And so we started scaling back. And then we found out we're allowed 10. Well, that barely includes all of our siblings, you know? Yeah. And so there was a lot of disappointment. And when I say that, I want to be careful to say that we're not disappointed in what is going to be the final outcome, which is the marriage.
Yes,
but
that's
there's a lot of, yeah, like that's the only thing that matters, right?
Yeah.
But there was a lot of planning that went in, and so there was a little bit of heartbreak here and there when we started to see that a lot of our plans weren't going to work out. We actually got an email on Saturday. Our honeymoon, as of right now, is not going to be happening. So I just got a lot of free time for next week.
Oh no.
And so we were actually supposed to get married on Saturday, but now we're at this point where it seems like any day we could all go on like a forced stay-at-home order. And so we're afraid that by Saturday, we won't be allowed out of our houses to get married. And so we've chosen to push the date up a little bit and get married on April 1st. We're super excited. I'm completely out kicking my coverage on this one. It is so much better than I could ever hope for. So much better than I deserve.
She is awesome.
She's great, man. She's I guess you'll find out more because she's going to be an upcoming guest.
Yeah, and now you've set a really high standard, so she's going to say very nice things about you, which is
what I want. So
yeah. Because remember from the first quote, you are Jesus. No, not accurate, but he is hidden within Christ, according to the so there you go.
That's it.
That's great. Hey, I wanted to I think that's awesome. 2 thoughts. First, I like that you chose April 1st because if you ever forget your anniversary, then on April 2nd, you can give her something and say, that was a joke from yesterday. A very clever man in the real Cory Sullivan. That's what separates him from the false Cory Sullivans. And the second thing is, we're running a little bit over our time here, which is awesome. What are we doing? We're just sitting here, so this is good. Tell me, just in your own words, as we summarize here, why is God awesome? Tell me that for people as we finish up here.
Man, God is awesome because no matter what happens, no matter how crazy or chaotic the world around you might be, you know that He's in control. You know that He's got this. You know, we don't know what tomorrow holds, but we can trust fully in the one who holds tomorrow.
Oh, beautiful. I feel like that should be in a song.
It probably is somewhere.
Yeah. That's awesome. I know at least right now, as far as we know, that tomorrow holds your wedding. So I'm super hopeful that everything continues to work out that way. We're going to be praying for you. I'm so thankful and blessed by you as a human. I really appreciate you. I'm so thankful that you were able to come on the show, the God is Awesome podcast, and tell people why God is awesome. So thank you again, Cory. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Best of luck tomorrow. I'm so happy for you. You deserve somebody like that. Actually, none of us do. So good job getting blessed. But as for now, for the rest of you, thanks again, Cory Sullivan, the real Cory Sullivan, for being on the God is Awesome podcast, a plethora of blessings that just came from the bottom. That's amazing. So plethora of blessings to you. And remember, between now and next time, which is next Thursday, we have another interview, which will be exciting. Remember, between now and then, that God is awesome. Thank you, Cory Sullivan, and have a blessed day. All right, bye-bye.